Yeah, and adding on to that, you know, going off of what Josh and Gala just shared, we're trying to use this opportunity to think about. I'm, so just to back up, for me, when I think about standardized testing, that's very different than thinking about assessment in the classroom or testing in the classroom in terms of how do we try to understand what students have learned from what we've taught and use that as feedback to like think about our instruction as next steps, right? But for me, standardized testing, one of the things that we tried to do is we tried to take away what the narrative around those data points means. It's not meant to be punitive towards students. It's not supposed to be punitive towards teachers. It's supposed to be a data point that helps us to understand our own system. So like for us, for example, when we look at proficiency scores for MCAs and we disaggregate it by race, the question that Gao and I have been pushing our system to take a look at is which students are not being served in our system, not which students are not capable, not which teachers are not good. That's not the point. The point is to peel back the layers of what's happening in our larger system. And at the same time, what's really fascinating for me is that while we're trying to change the narrative of what the data point means in our system, there are some people that are really tied to it and they want to use those data points to put students into accelerated classes. So for example, we know that our system is, you know, honors whiteness. It is shaped in white supremacy. There are students that this system was not created for, and we have standardized data points that tell us that there are certain students that are going to do well in our system and other students that aren't because of how the system was created, right? So white, middle and upper middle class students in our system tend to do well on those standardized tests. And while we say we want to be about racial equity and we want to have integrated accelerated classes and so on and so forth, we still have a history of using those data points to then put white students into accelerated classes. So we're trying to, now that we have an opportunity to say, well, we don't have that data point in the spring, so let's think differently about what acceleration means. Not necessarily like gifted and talented. I know Kogat was just mentioned, but just in general, like how can we use this as an opportunity to really place more Black and brown students into those accelerated classes if we're still gonna have it next year?
Hi, Nate Gibbs from Minnetonka High School here. I would add, I'm really interested in how AP testing goes this year. With the approach being open book and open note testing, because I think that approach really allows us to assess students' higher order thinking skills and their ability to respond to and articulate complex material rather than assessing those lower level skills, like Sylvie said, that are steeped in whiteness and steeped in an approach to teaching and learning that have historically benefited white upper income students and not others. So in some ways, I'm really excited that this health crisis has produced some space for schools and testing institutions to look differently at what we value around tests.
Yeah, thank you. I think that flows quite nicely into a decision that Macalester has made recently. I'm wondering if, Adam, you could speak a little bit to Macalester's decision to go test optional during this time and to make it not only for this incoming session, but also a permanent decision.
Yeah, of course. So I'll just kind of give a more general higher education landscape around that question. So especially given everything that's going on with COVID-19, there are a lot of institutions of all types, whether they be liberal arts schools or larger state universities and everything in between, who are going test optional. Some of them on a permanent basis, but most of them so far are saying on a temporary basis. Macalester's admissions office has actually been looking at this question for, I think, as early as 3 years ago is when they started to do some research into how standardized testing was being incorporated into the admissions process. And so this has been a decision that's been a long time coming. I will say personally, I am thrilled and think it was an overdue decision in a lot of ways. Again, we thought a lot about how we assess students in a test optional scenario as well as using the testing. So we actually looked at our assessment of students from 5 years ago and then reassessed them without looking at their testing and compared those differences just to see if that was something that we were going to be able to do. Yeah, so that's sort of the context of what Macalester has done recently. I will say too, it's an interesting thing. I took a class on this in graduate school, and one thing when we're talking about access that's kind of interesting to consider is other schools who have gone test optional in the past have not necessarily seen an increase in access. And one factor for that might be that for students who aren't supported with the kind of college counseling and support that comes with a lot of privilege, the test optional piece actually adds a layer of uncertainty for students who might not have the support to answer the question of, should I submit my test or should I not? That said, there's obviously endless research out there that shows when you're looking at test scores in a vacuum, basically the thing that it most correlates with is your family's income, which is of course problematic in a lot of ways, which is ultimately the main reason why I personally am very excited that we've finally taken this step.
Thank you. I was wondering if we could get a word from our student panelists and how this has kind of impacted your year, and tests that you may or may not have been preparing for are suddenly out the window, and all of it, like the end of your year has changed dramatically.
Yeah, so again, my name is Atquetzali. I go to Open World Learning, but I'm actually also a PSEO student at the University of Minnesota. So my experience is actually quite different than what a normal, student would kind of go through on a daily basis. But for me, personally, I'm really excited that Macalester chose to, possibly have just test optional all the way through permanently. I know that my ACT score did not reflect in any way my academic capabilities. Just for transparency, I'm pretty sure I got below average for the US, which is okay. And I know for a while I did beat myself up about that, but what I chose to do is actually apply to schools that were test optional because of that. And it felt kind of bad because then I was taking away that opportunity from myself to apply to schools that did take ACTs because I didn't think my score was good enough. And so I definitely think that it is important. And there's so many layers when it goes into testing. Just like how much support do you have from your teachers or from your community, and testing strategies, and are you taught that from a young age? And usually, that sadly, the support you get correlates with, if you live in a high income or low income area. And so, I definitely think that testing is not a reflection of anyone in any sort of way. And so that's why it's important that I feel like all schools should be test optional. So I'm really glad Macalester took that step. But yeah, that's just my little spiel.
Yeah, I can also jump in real quick in my kind of personal story with again, kind of like standardized tests specifically. For me, it was the ACT as well, as that being the big standardized test that St. Paul Public School does. And for me, actually, I took the test twice, and the first time, just a few weeks before I took the test, I was actually in a pretty bad car accident. And I just recently got out of the hospital and was still suffering like a severe concussion. And so going into the test, I knew I wasn't going to be prepared. So I tried to take those steps ahead, and I emailed the ACT and said, hey, and I kind of like laid out what happened. I was like, I just got out of the hospital. I haven't been able to study, and I'm still not going to be able to study for months to come. So like, are there accommodations for this test, or like how do we go with that? And they told me I passed. They were like, the deadline for any accommodations is passed. Like, you have to take the test as is. So I was really frustrated with myself after the test, even though there wasn't a whole lot that I could do, because getting the score back, I knew I could do better. I took practice tests and got 10 points higher than what I scored on my official test. So I kind of roll with that, and kind of knew going like as time went on, I was like I knew I couldn't do anything about it. So I ended up retaking the test again before the school year started, and I scored a lot better. I scored 8 points higher than my original test. So I thought that was like, I was really proud of myself for that, as I felt that's how I felt I should have done. And they said I cheated, and I got accused for cheating on the ACT because of an 8-point jump difference. And at this point, I was pretty frustrated after taking it the second time. It's like, I'm trying to go back into school right now and apply to all these colleges. And it's a very hard process. Like, the college application process, I'm sure everyone in here and everyone watching knows, or will know soon if you're in high school, is a very hard and stressful process. So for me, that added so much more pressure, in the sense of like, I'm trying to submit one score that I feel like accurately represented, or at least closer accurately represented, like what I was capable of. And the ACT saying no. And then, I got letters of rec from Gao Thor, the superintendent for SPPS. I got it from the chief of neurosurgery and the concussion clinic, saying that like in his medical standing, he felt like the test aligned. And from other people, I got from the John Linder. He works in the research evaluation and assessment for SPPS, and he helped me with this case too. And he wrote a lengthy letter of rec saying from my point of view, it all makes sense too. And I'm going back to the ACT with this stuff, as well as like my car accident stuff, and they're saying like you cheated. And I was like, I'm still just trying to push for more information. They're like, it really got frustrating when they started saying, when you compare your test to your classmates and those who look like you, that's our red flags. And like, I have the documents of them saying like where you're located in the city, like you're such an outlier that's why we feel like you cheated. And it's very frustrating. And then like college decisions came up, and I'm getting waitlisted or rejected, not even able to apply because I'm not able to like submit a test score to those colleges. And I think that really does show the importance of testing. And when I say importance, I know a lot of people take importance in a positive light, but I definitely mean it in like a negative light, on how important these test scores can be, and how negatively they can affect like your college experience. And kind of also like how out of your control it is. Like, by the end, and this is like just a few months ago, I the ACT sent me a letter, and it was just probably about 2 sentences, and said like, we've decided to cancel the test score. Like, there's no more that you can do. And I remember like signing like when you first take the ACT, you sign a little box that says the ACT has the right to cancel your test scores, like with like no questions asked kind of. And it was just frustrating because like I knew I had to sign that box to take the test, but then I also like would never expect like for them to actually do it. So, but yeah, that was just kind of like my little spiel on like how I learned. On one of the ways I learned just like how negatively important that like that specific test was.